All right, everyone. I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Beyond Baroque. Welcome to the Wanda Coleman Theater. Let's give it up for these folks. They're going to be celebrating a new book. Jill Moser, Elena Karina Byrne, Major Jackson. I'm going to just open it up for you folks, let you know that you're in unceded territory of the Tonga peoples, and we acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism and genocidal practices and the violent disposition of their land. As an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting Indigenous communities, their stories, and cultures. For those who don't know, Beyond Baroque is Los Angeles' oldest literary arts institution, located here in the old Venice City Hall. We do host over 100 readings a year, this being one of them, and super excited to spend this Sunday afternoon with you all. Next week, we are going to be starting programs on Thursday with Earth Day Cabaret. So we're celebrating National Poetry Month by celebrating the Earth as well. To tell you a little bit more about our featured guest today, Jill Moser's paintings, drawings, prints, and artist books have been exhibited in galleries and museums throughout the United States and Europe, and featured in prominent collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, the National Gallery of Art, the Yale University of Art Gallery, the Fogg Art Museum, and the National Library of France. Over the past 2 decades, Moser has made numerous print editions with Jungle Press, Burnett Editions, Wingate Studios, Landfall Press, Brand X, Collaborative Art Editions, Mannequin Press, and Blue Azure. She continues to engage in other collaborative projects with writers, artists, designers, and architects. She has taught at Princeton University, Virginia and Commonwealth University, SUNY, and the School of Visual Arts, and lectured across the United States. She lives and works in New York. Major Jackson is the author of 6 books of poetry, most recently Razzle Dazzle, New and Selected Poems. He is also the author of A Beat Beyond, the selected prose of Major Jackson, edited by Amor Colley. Major lives in Nashville, Tennessee, where he is the Gertrude Conaway Vanderbilt Chair in Humanities at Vanderbilt University. He is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and serves as the poetry editor of the Harvard Review. From 2023 to 2025, he hosted the award-winning podcast, The Slowdown. He is the inaugural recipient of the Patricia Cannon Willis Prize for American Poetry from Yale Library. A Pushcart Prize recipient and author of 5 poetry collections, Elena Karina Byrne received an MFA in screenwriting from Antioch University during COVID. Her poetry and nonfiction work can be found in Poetry, Best American Poetry, the Kenyon Review, the Paris Review, APR, Los Angeles Review of Books, Plume Anthologies, Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, Verse Daily, Real Verse, Poems About the Movies, The Eloquent Poem, 128 Contemporary Poems and Their Making, Adroit Journal, Bomb, and elsewhere. Elena works as a freelance editor, lecturer, screenwriter, and programming consultant and poetry stage manager for the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, and director of poetry and interdisciplinary programs for the historic Ruskin Art Club. Please welcome our guests, and please enjoy this afternoon. Thank you.
So I'm Elena Karina Byrne. I wrote the introduction to Jill's gorgeous book, which you should seriously consider. It's not just an art piece in itself. It would make an incredible gift. But we met because of a mutual friend, the poet Chase Twitchell, and Jill found out that I grew up with artists and art and was immersed in the art world when I was young, but decided to sort of strike out on my own and become a writer. But now it's wonderful to bring this sort of full circle. So what we're going to do is Jill's going to tell you a little bit about the project and about also her history as an artist, and what this involves, and then I will say a few things. Major will say a few things. We might go back and forth, and then we will ask you questions and hopefully make this a continued conversation. Thank you for coming today.
So you're both going to read the pieces, okay? Hi. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how this came to be. Painting is a solitary practice, as you all probably know. But from my earliest days as a painter, I've been interested in the relationship between language and imagery, both literally and figuratively. And about 20 years ago, I started working collaboratively with, outside of the studio, with master printers, architects, poets, and other visual artists. And one of them being Major Jackson. And at the start of the pandemic, in the spring of 2020, I began to paint these small, actually, I'm just going to play these small, intense collages. And I called them my daily meditations. And it continued my, how come it's not playing? It's my, okay. And at the time I had started to study deeply color and form, but also I had begun these in dialogue with a poet and a painter who were both in another state and isolated like me and missing the exchange of ideas in the studio. So these meditations became a very important part of my practice. And now really the atlas of images from which I work with in my paintings, in my print editions. So in January of 25, with the divisive threats posed by the new administration, which we've sadly now come to realize, I reached out to a large circle of friends, everyone who wrote in some capacity. And they were all the voices that had sort of been in my studio the last 30 years or so, and many I'd previously collaborated with. And I asked them to engage in this sort of play. And I invited them to choose one of my works. I sent them an image file of 50 works. And I said, this will be your image. And the only rule of the game was that they had to address the image and not me. And I was giving them a page that was 9 by 9 inches. And so, to my amazement and delight, 40 people said yes. And more amazingly, each of them picked a different image. And so they're poets, they're journalists, they're psychoanalysts, they're curators, they're artists, they're screenwriters, novelists, art historians. And together they form this great chorus, which then became this book. So take it away.
So I will start, and I'm going to read one of my own and one by Agnes Berentz, and come back to several others.
Wait, you have to wait till I find you.
Okay, I'll talk. So my friend Jill and I had, as indicated, collaborated before, and it was a wonderful experience. I particularly like the conversations that happen across disciplines. I've collaborated with musicians as well. And one aspect of collaborating with Jill is there is a vision that is not imposed necessarily, at least with our previous projects. It was far more collaborative. So I welcomed actually the idea of an ekphrastic project. although I'm also attuned to and love historically, let's say Motherwell, responding to, I mix my Roberts all the time. Motherwell responding to Gabriel Garcia Lorca, or Frank O'Hara responding to Grace Hardigan, Jenny Holzer responding to the poet Henri Cole. And that's what it felt like last time. So in this instance, when Jill sent me the above image, I was allowed to kind of meditate upon not only this image, but what was happening in our country, in our lives, and maybe even in my own personal life. I think one of the aspects of art that the poet Gwendolyn Brooks says is art encourages, I'm quoting her, in a poem that she wrote about Picasso, she said, art encourages voyages. And in this particular case, the voyage was very palpable for me. We're all familiar with the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, and that's one that has inspired a number of poems. And when I try to imagine the underworld, for some reason, this comes closest. Most people think of the underworld as this kind of dark place, and I was thinking about, and you'll hear the myth emerge out of it, but also you might even hear some of the headlines. The assignment of that the poem not be about Jill, I kind of pushed back a little in the title. It's called Moser-esque. The machines became our faces, but the hallways prefigured our fears. I made a habit of looking around corners and discovered all our treasured beliefs molting. And so exquisite thought rendered my appliances utterly useless. I was back in the cave, tempted to peer over my shoulder, her voice fading into darkness. But I trust the colors that restore my footfalls. Had I known that I might have written something longer, had I known that you were going to change the font size. So I'm going to read Agnes Berendt, who has lines in her piece that are inspired by Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons. They're actual lines. Yeah. I said, yeah. All this and not ordinary. On Friday, August 27th of 2021, the U.S. media was reporting on suicide bombers, legal proceedings, cryptocurrencies, vaccine mandates, and the approach of Tropical Storm Ida. On Shelter Island, Jill Moser was working in the studio on a series of small-scale collages called Daily Meditations. Temperatures were well over 80 degrees with thunder forecast in the vicinity around 2 in the afternoon. When the day was done and the meditation ended, 8/27/21 was made. There is no how nor why, only when. What is a work's relationship to its time? What is its time? Is it the time of its maker? What is cut? What is cut by it? Measuring roughly 8 by 8 inches, 8/27/21 is constructed from colored pieces of paper. It is an arrangement of machine-made and handmade, dense and lean, smooth and textured surfaces that cover, align, overlap with, and bulge underneath each other. Cutting is both an act and a boundary, and in 8/27/21, papers are sliced, colors are carved, and borders declared. Lines thin and thick, literal and painted, quiver and waver. 8/27/21 is a sculpted terrain, an imaginary topography. It is about the process of assembling things to make a place, about the contingencies of the hand and about the desire to declare, and at the same time erase boundaries. There is a kind. Made of competing layers of paper and gouache, they play hide and seek with each other. 82721 is a densely saturated sequence of various greens, grayish lilac and magenta, bold, solid, and porous. None of the colors evoke nature. Some, like the magenta stripes, have a loud, even aggressive luminosity that complements the haptic violence of cutout papers. But are they magenta or red-violet or rose, crimson, reddish purple, or pink? How to call the color of the thin vertical lines that create an overlaid asymmetrical frame. Dated but untitled 82721 signals the futility of language to name what takes place among its layered cuts and hues. By defying linguistics and resisting geometry, it makes its own rules.
Before I read the two pieces, I'll just give you a quote from Cézanne, because I think about this kind of conversation as, well, all art being, elements of consciousness. And Jill's work in particular has that feeling of consciousness in motion, and how there's a sort of this continual, especially with abstract art, a feeling of absence and presence, continuously being in motion, and more than just a measure of time or some liminal threshold. It's kind of like when you're looking at a work of art, something is happening that is almost pre-verbal, at least for me. It's a whole body engagement, a kind of almost erotic, a kind of eros is at work, because intuition orchestrates and celebrates what you're looking at. It solicits from you too, sort of an anticipatory sense of longing and desire and all the things that kind of float in that in-between space before language is actually formed, at least for me. But Cézanne said something wonderful. He said, "The landscape thinks itself in me." So this poem is by Paul Muldoon, and the image is on the screen. It's called "The End of the Affair." Through spring and summer we would offer thanks for the shady groves of Granville and Glasdromond. Autumn had set off a few wagging tongues. Now winter was giving us the silent treatment. All right. The second piece, and this is the only long one that I will read, is by Nancy Princenthal. Aha! The play of light alone in space, of light on water, of placing one color beside another, thereby changing both. These are some of the painting's moves. Others involve the establishment of boundaries, ridges, and declivities. Here, a swoop of tart green upstages a gray arc that hunches its shoulders behind. A gentle hill, rosy but unlit, snuggles up below. Beneath that, a color with no name. All are laid down across patches of applied paper. A game is afoot. We writers have been invited to play too, to indulge ourselves. The license is irresistible. Alas, is it me, the time we live in? A ditch, a stumbling block, is what comes first to mind. Specifically, the ha-ha, a term of landscape design I've long been tickled by, and which I discover via the UK National Trust website comes from the that is a pair of perfectly mismatched languages mirroring each other. I like that. A narrow, dry trough walled on at least one side. The ha-ha is a feature of strollers. Feature of strollers, of unbroken expanse, while making sure the livestock, decorative, one supposes, don't wander. A ha-ha finds British laughter in this sleight of hand, a tight, happy snort of discovery. Behind it, quietly, is the exhaled ah of pure Gaelic delectation. Let's just lie down right here. Landscape is a fiction, a place we create to revel in the world's beauty, to confine and preserve it. It is born in nostalgia for a lost wonder, the wilderness that became visible only in retrospect after it had been tamed. In a word, landscape was born as image. Yet the reverse is also true. Painting, whatever the subject, makes space, makes sense, sensation. It can create bounded forms that open suddenly into previously unseen dimensions. It offers a place to sequester sunlight, the source of all color, an immeasurable and essentially unverifiable quality, irreducibly personal and incommunicable. An inside joke, color is a secret code spoken by one, also a universal language speaking for infinity.
As Elena was reading, I was thinking about how generous Jill was to open up this project to anyone that wrote, including the curators and critics. And I think, as you heard with Agnes, there's the language of the critic kind of informs and journeys us through the painting. And I was thinking while Elena was reading, there was this almost kind of, there's the painting, there's the language, and then there is what is happening in our own interiority that allows these convergences to become either at great distance or close. Jennifer McGregor is a curator, and she wrote this piece to this particular meditation. Present tense, as in contemporaneous edgy? No. As in an action happening now, a general truth. I see. The patches conceal windows to a place beyond, or the edge is not a border. Present tense, continuous. The ochre and the turquoise fields are holding space for a vessel. Or the purple forms are moving shadows behind us. Split infinitive. The white line is intermittently revealing light from beyond. Or the purple drip is actually splitting the page. I grew up going to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and there was this Bruce Nauman painting that this actually reminds me of. And I was also thinking about the importance of color with this primary color with these projects, and the appeal almost, what's the word I want to use? I think there is something about a younger major that is enjoying these canvases quite a bit. Yeah.
It's the Nauman, the artist on cover.
Bruce Nauman.
But is it that piece, the artist on cover?
I cannot remember, but there is much in the same way that Jennifer interprets light coming through with this stroke of white. There's something that happens with a red object among this black canvas that's in the northeast corner of the canvas. Yeah, I do.
So thinking about ekphrasis and then going back to like looking at art, I love this. Do you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Stendhal syndrome. Is also known as the Florence syndrome. Is a psychosomatic condition where individuals experience physical and emotional symptoms when exposed to objects or scenes of great beauty, particularly works of art. These symptoms can range from rapid heartbeat, dizziness, a confusion to more severe reactions like fainting, panic attacks, and even hallucinations. I don't think anyone has yet done that for us. And then the other quote that I wanted to offer was the theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli says, "There's an intimate connection between time and heat. There's a paradox at the heart of our understanding of the physical world. The world seems to be less about objects than about interactive relationships." And that's what this is about too. The border is porous. The space is not an inert box, but rather something dynamic. Okay, so my next piece is by wonderful friend and poet Chase Twitchell. It's called Old Love. A long love means the first part is old, though still attached. Some of it's forgotten or disagreed upon. Seams and glue, not cracks. If death steals half the love, the rest does not wither or collapse. Its memorial candles go on flickering in the dark. Secret stars above a place where sky and sea come close to one another, but do not touch. Whatever wounds there were are hidden now, barely a trickle of old blood disguised as rust. This next poem is by Susan Lewis. Amazement. Amazement. As Ariadne strung expectant sea in ink or oil or beating blood, here as there or now as where, kind in kind to merge, emerge. This fossil stream, its fallow gleam, snug chants, sung dance, core cry, cri de corps, creed of cure, wound and found, in and out and to and fro, crown thrown down or overthrown. Hard hearts heard, hurt here, high flown, low blown, now ever in this slough of respond, new and known, in this lone, unknown, unowned, here as there, and now as where. You like that one?
Come on, it's all been great.
I was so organized. was so organized, and then I saw you. I'm kidding. Split. This is by Dee Dee Jackson. If I could just thumb the horizon, its knife edge, allow my hand to slither the black line that runs for days. If I could snake, if I could box, if I could slat, if I could turtle and petal and well, oh, holy well with ancient hymns in the ripples, a box turtle with a dome shell, and a fence for the moon, a toccata and fugue. If I was the aftermath or was thrifted like an old coat, when I am round and look in the mirror, I only see square. One of three sisters might erupt in my lifetime. They flirt with the sky that tends to be too remote, messy with salt stars. Though I like the sky, it is a darling in the morning when the light is a moody blue and the pines cast their green shadows. The sun might decide to lift and follow any tiny swallow skimming for food along the invisible tremors of blaze. If I were that swallow, if I were the sappy trunk, if I were whole, if I could never be hurt.
One of the contributors to this book is a psychoanalyst who lives in New York and also courageously wrote this poem. Well, I was about to say courageous for having written this poem, named David Lichtenstein, who is Jill's husband. We both share a love of the jazz musician and big band leader Sun Ra, and there's early Sun Ra, which I don't think this poem alludes to, but the later Sun Ra, who said he was from Saturn. And I think this poem gets at some of the ambiguity and the freedom. I think that's when I think about Sun Ra, I think about freedom of sound, but here it's of color and language. But it's called Spacing Place, and the echo of Sun Ra's space is the place. Spacing Place. I'm gonna read it twice because it's so short. The place is space, Sun Ra. The space for two places, neither insisting on the other's presence nor being as they would be without it. What lies between them as boundary and bridge. Spacing place. The place is space, Sun Ra. The space for two places, neither insisting on the other's presence nor being as they would be without it. What lies between them as boundary and bridge. And finally, this features, well, I'll just read it. It's by Jesse Browner. John Berger taught us that the relationship between what we see and what we know is never settled. This work reminds us that all art is, in essence, abstract. If it appears to represent something that exists in the empirical world, that is, something we believe we know and recognize, that is only a trick the brain plays on the eye. We know from our experience that when the eye is confronted by a plane of color or form, that the mind, in its desire to protect us from unknown dangers, is not able to identify immediately. The eye flits and hovers restlessly above it, looking for a perch, like a bird in a storm. it grows uneasy. It cannot settle. We experience its disquiet as a tension that we have evolved to seek its palliate. The brain says, keep looking. Moser says, welcome home.
So I think it'd be interesting if we open it up to a Q&A, and then we can continue in this conversation. I know we have some eager minds just ready to speak.
Did you have a favorite?
This is mine.
Yes.
My name's Daniel. I'm a fan of all of yours. I love the paintings. And I was intrigued by the few poems. I think Major read one, and I think there was another where actual words for color came up. And the one that Major read, acknowledged about the uncertainty of which words apply to which colors. And I was struck also before that writer even spoke to that, that when she said magenta, I thought, to me, that's not magenta to me. And so I realized that color words are really odd words. And I don't know what kind of words they are exactly, but they're a bit like proper names. But they're, in the same way that proper names are, in some sense, belong to someone very particular, they float around and can become attached. They don't have a meaning in some sense. So one of the things I was struck about was what that yielded for me in the poem that Major read, and then I think in the one that Elena read also, was the acknowledgement that that language, that there's a kind of fallibility, there's a kind of weakness. It can't really name these colors. And that always stands in contrast to the fact that for the paintings, it doesn't need to be named, it's central, it doesn't have that kind of problem. And so the thing that really touched me about this, well, first it was that wondering about color names and what kind of words they actually are. But, and how odd they are, they're different from other kinds of words and ways. But also this sense that at some moment, maybe more than the few poems, that the writings willingly falter and admit their incapacities, and that poetry or writing, and it's as if one of the things that comes out of this is that poetry or writing is able to acknowledge its failures and its inabilities, that it just can't. And then you begin to see the gulf between the writing and the painting, that they're so far away, and yet that doesn't diminish the feeling, right? The intimacy of feeling, even if there cannot be. We don't. So my question is about how you felt about this question of poetry disclosing and even possibly acknowledging its incapacities.
Well, I feel like, as was said, actually, a lot of the text too, I feel like there's an open-endedness, and which is, as human beings, and particularly with language, we want to frame and reframe, we want to contain, because it makes us feel safe. But with art, there's that constant, and like you were saying, your mind is going all at once. Even while you're speaking, your mind is already somewhere else, because there's that continual association and reassociation. And so you're moving out into this realm that does make you feel vulnerable. And I know that the scientists say there's no consciousness without language. I don't believe that's true. Just because babies, I have a weird memory of being a baby, and seeing, and I can see the imagery perfectly. It's just that we want to use the linguistic tag. We want to keep And that's the thing about language too. In other cultures, there are different languages, there are different words for certain things, for certain emotions that we don't have. Like for example, the Japanese have a word for a smile that appears and is quickly gone. And they have similar words too, but I'm just saying that, language is so, we rely on it so much, but at the same time, it actually kind of exists in this realm, which is to say, and apparently, like with memories are not stored in our head, that our brain fires to bring it back. So I'm just thinking that maybe in that way, like you were saying, that there's just a continuum of trying to orient ourselves somehow. I don't know. But I know you have, for the painter, it's a different, somewhat different relationship.
But one of the ideas of the whole project.
Yeah, give her.
Oh, sorry. One of the whole ideas of the project was to look at how mutable language is, and in relation to, visual imagery, which is impossible to describe, pinpoint. And I was asking for, one of the things I didn't say was that in inviting my friends to write, I did invite them to write in a way to take liberties with writing, and to write in a way that they might not have a chance to do in their professions. So, for instance, a number of the people that major, well, both Major and Elena read, are art historians, curators, who write in a certain way. And it was fabulous to see them play. Yeah. And what they're addressing is the language of description, which is, all over the map. So,
Lewis's book was so interesting because it was not descriptive. It was this wonderful performance of poetry's special talents to be sonic and rhyme, and that was wonderful.
yeah, and I think there is, and you guys can talk about this more than me, but there is, for poets, there's a real comfort in being able to be in this language, whereas like Jennifer's never written anything like that in her life. So, yeah, but you can talk about that.
Oh no, I was just going to in response to what you just said. I was going to say don't, and also the artist John. You've heard me say this before, but the artist John Baldessari said all seeing is, we have hierarchies of seeing. So, and basically what that means is we're already bringing our experiences to the table, to the moment, and we're already have this sort of tidal wave of influence, whether it's familial, cultural, social, and even on the smallest of level. But that's what I'm thinking. We bring that to the moment, and then because think about it. When you go to a museum with someone, you can have entirely different responses.
Thank you for opening us up with this. I loved your phrase, that floating around. And for me, the joy of both now reading and looking at Jill's is that it does invite what I mentioned earlier, those voyages. And I love the indeterminacy of language that doesn't necessarily anchor. I love that the abandonment of meaning. At the same time, I just saw an exhibition, and I realized recently I'm not a fan of untitled works. And recently there was a trend of untitled, and then within parentheses, giving us a title, which I don't know I'm like, make a decision, is it titled or not? But that invitation to, and what I hear with some of these is, I'm going to take you into the motions of my mind as I absorb this collage. And there's an invitation, I think, by publishing it, to argue with it And that too, I think, is really important. And I think I've even heard you talk about wrestling with some of how the work has been interpreted, or maybe not necessarily being in agreement with what was set down. Right. Yeah, yeah, and that's okay too.
Yeah, yeah. And I let it be. Yeah, yeah, it's in the book.
Could you say something about your relationship to your early relationship to cinema? Because I love that leap, that juxtaposition when in relation to your work. You were saying that film was an influence.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just about my origins. Yeah, yeah. Well, very quickly. I really cut my teeth on abstraction watching 70s avant-garde cinema in New York City. I grew up in the suburbs of New York and spent a lot of my high school years looking at 70s avant-garde cinema in the basement of the Whitney Museum and Anthology Film Archives. And from that, I learned it was a cinema that didn't was without language. Generally, maybe sound, and was essentially abstract. But it taught me about a kind of meditative way of looking. And that's what I wanted when I came to make visual work. So, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Maybe another question for Joanna.
Yeah, I'm going to build a little bit on what Daniel said because I found it very rich. But also because I think as I read through the book, one of the things I was struck by was the range of language types. Okay, so there is a lot of descriptive work, but there's a lot of work that's very, like, referencing events or personal experience. And like the Nancy Prinzenthal piece, for instance, that you read, Elena, very descriptive. The shoulder, the color, and the Paul Muldoon piece that you read right before is not. It's got a wonderful evocative, emotional connection to the work. And so the range of different language types, very, very interesting, because for me that set up a very interesting kind of productive tension between the consistency of the images as a type of image and the differences of the language. So the differences in the language became so marked because there was this, relationship. So one of the questions I have for you is, have you ever thought about doing a parallax experiment where you ask two writers to write about the same piece? Because I think it would make a great next project, which would be to see how the differences are in that perceptual field. So it's just a thought, but this is the atoms. I love the atoms. Yeah. What's the title?
The Happiness of Atoms.
Of Atoms. Yeah, I love this piece.
And that's Laurie Scheck, who's poet who now writes fiction.
Yeah, a very rich exploration of these issues.
And that's, sorry, it's very long. And it's wild. It's completely wild. It's all about, it's Einstein. It's all the stuff she's deeply interested in now. No, it's the history of atoms. It's the history of the science of atoms. It's really fun. Buy the book. And she reads it as well. And I've collaborated with her in the past. So yeah. And she's written a new book called Cyber Fever, and this is related to that. So of course she picked this image. But to Joanna's point, sort of your idea is kind of the whole idea behind this, in that everybody was responding to a body of work and then picking, but I would love to see that too. And then Paul Muldoon at the reading in New York for the opening of the show talked about how interesting it is that in looking at abstraction, people desire narrative, and that of course he did that for his. Right.
More questions?
I'm happy you framed it that way. when I first read it, I had to adjust my expectations. Something about the different registers of language. I was expecting not high poetic, lyric, but it was in the foreground. So I had to push that aside and give way to the more critical language. The maybe even I'm looking at Charles Bernstein's, which is a sonic. I feel like that one is sonically driven, but you said it's a rich tension, and it brought up for me not necessarily quality, but what would happen if you had given even more parameters on the writers rather than the freedom. Just
like what?
Actual constraints.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to ask people to edit their pieces when they became too much about me and not
Interesting.
these.
So
Yeah.
why that constraint?
Because I wanted it to, I was interested in the relation. I was interested in
Their relationship
the
to
language
the,
to image, yeah, and also because that's not, it's not done enough in writing about art. This one is really, that one was really interesting because that was Allison Mitchell, who's the deputy editor of on the international desk at the New York Times, and took this as a really fun challenge because she said, I write about hard facts, and she had never done anything like this. Yeah.
It's interesting what you said about that constraint, that not writing about you, which it raises this problem that may be there, that it's the question of looking. You want people to look at the images, and maybe there's always a tendency for people, even though they're writing about an image, to not look at it.
Mark Doty said, looking and looking causes time to open.
And then Rob, who is it? Valerie said, seeing is forgetting the name of the thing seen.
Oh, yes, yes.
Who said that?
Valerie.
That was,
Right, wasn't it?
is that the title of the
It's quoted, yes, it's the title of Lawrence Wexler's book.
book on Robert Irwin?
Right,
Oh,
right,
Irwin.
but it's from this
I thought it was
French.
Wittgenstein, but maybe you're right.
No, I think
You're
it's, I'm not sure. We'll have to, someone Google
The
it.
battle of the quotes. You got a question?
Yeah, Vincent.
Oh, yeah, I was just curious what this whole project taught you all about the nature of collaboration and how you fit collaboration into a life in the art or in the kind of creative spaces, just given your backgrounds.
Very nice question. I love collaboration, and it's changed my life, my work, my relationship to my work, and that's why I invent these projects, and because it's a way of both sort of challenging what you do and affirming what you do. And I'm always after this idea that there are these kind of equivalents. I mean, this book is also about the fact that I'm a painter who, I mean, first of all, I have great admiration for writers. And so I'm a painter who seeks the company of people who work in other disciplines. And those are important voices in my studio. So it's a way of having dialogue, really. And I learned so much about my own work by doing it. And so it's selfish.
I think we're already instantly collaborating when we're stepping up to look at a work or to read a work, and it just hasn't been acknowledged, right? We're trying we're dialoguing. Yeah, I think collaboration is really important, and I wish that there was more of it. I feel like that we don't need to sequester all of these different arts. I had a series at the Chateau Marmont, and it paired actors and poets, and the funders were not really happy about that. They somehow thought that the pull on the two arts was somehow going to lessen the worth or the intensity. It was actually the opposite, because people came, for example, to hear the actors, and then they realized, oh, there's a common vocabulary going on here. There's something more that I can experience all at once. And yeah, so
I'm humbled whenever I encounter the crucible of imagination by particularly non-writers, and it brings out all kinds of envy. I wish I had a certain way of seeing the world that visual artists or musicians that I've collaborated with, and they feel equally about me, so I get to feel good about my art as a result. Each collaboration is different, and I think that's owed to the personality of the person that I've worked with.
And even with the same person.
So that's right. So Jill and I did several canvases together where we worked over some poems that I had written, but the layout was important, and she involved me in that process. And the challenging part of that for me personally was, although I think in images, when it comes to putting them on a canvas or a print, I really wanted her to kind of assert, but I really also enjoyed how you pulled me into that process. So it was challenging in all the best ways. Yeah. And I think I even made some edits as a result of thinking about those poems visually. Like they appear differently in my book as a result. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because ekphrastic poetry, we do a lot of that, and when we teach, I brought paintings into a class, and everybody will write a different poem about it. You know, the way they see it. They're more figurative paintings, but they'll tell stories in their poems that each one is different, and the painter probably didn't mean any of that. So there's a lot of, we go to museums, look at paintings and write poems. The paintings are prompts. And I just wonder if the reverse is true. Do painters paint based on a poem they've read? Like, oh, I've just read this poem, I must go home and do a painting about it. I think it's time.
New York Magazine had a series, didn't they? New York Magazine.
Yes, they did.
Oh,
actually.
did they?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, the New York Times, Alex Katz wrote I wrote the poem, and he painted. And it was a series of those one year. But I was mentioning earlier, not Rauschenberg, not Mapplethorpe, but Robert Motherwell. And this is a quiz. So Motherwell took some elegies by Gabriel Garcia Lorca and did these wonderful kind of rich black paintings that was obviously also inspired by his thinking of the Spanish Civil War. I mentioned Grace Hardigan and Frank O'Hara. And that was it. Yeah.
In memory of my feelings. I mean, it's
Yes.
all of those artists.
Yeah.
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 So they're there, and I wish there were more, actually.
I did a whole series from Roland Barthes' Lover's Discourse, the book, not the poem.
I
Yeah.
love that book.
Yeah. So
The Lover's Discourse.
Yeah.
Roland Barthes.
Yeah.
I have one more question about collaboration, which is I just realized when you were talking for a moment about the book, that the design of the book would, to some degree, reinvent the encounter between the two media. In other words, where is the text going to be? Where is the image going to be?
Yeah.
And I realized then that, of course, the collaboration that you've given us today is read poems and poems on the screen, which is utterly different than the design and collaboration in the book.
Right.
So I wondered if you could say something about the...
So there have been many iterations of this project. I mean, it began as a book, and I was only thinking of a book. My closest friend is a graphic designer, so it was, I mean, the whole project's been collective. A collective experience. And so she and I worked together to make the book. The reason it's printed the way it is so that each spread opens up completely flat, so that
The text is on one page.
yes, and that's consistent through the book. Sorry?
Unfussed. It's like the way writers talk about translation is that you have the original and they call that unfussed.
Unfussed, you said. Okay, yeah. And it's the same font, but it's leaded differently on the same page. What else can I tell you about that? But then it became an exhibition in New York, which just closed yesterday. And for that exhibition, somewhere, but here, if your page, no, the vinyl. Yeah, so for the exhibition, we were able to reproduce each page perfectly, and it went on the wall underneath the framed work, so that you read the exhibition. You could also listen to the exhibition because there's a QR code that comes with the book, but has 32 of the writers read their pieces, and we had a reading. And then, what else did it become? Soon to be a major motion picture. And then these readings, yeah.
There was a question there.
Zach or John.
I'm not sure if I have a question, but I'm sort of struck by the word of narrative and your frustration of going to an abstract painting and seeing untitled. And I guess I'm sort of fascinated with our own desire to want to find narrative in everything that we do. And I'm also struck by the experience that you must have had when you're seeing something abstract and then realize I have to form words around that, form a narrative, really. And I was struck by the word that you were talking about landscape paintings, I believe. I wasn't sure. And that they're really kind of, fiction, thank you. That really struck me. And I guess I was sort of fascinated with, here, just today, us being here is performative. You know, we're creating narrative to something that is originally abstract. You talk about your sort of your 70s experience in abstraction and wanting to go that direction. And I guess I'm just sort of, Jill, when you first put this out there, knowing that you create this abstract work, that people who you were giving it to were going to create a reaction to it, that they had to create a narrative behind. And I guess I'm just sort of curious about that desire for you to see how do people react to this, how do they form it into words, what goes on with that, I guess. What were your expectations, I guess?
I didn't have any.
Well, you put it out there.
Thank you. I wanted to be surprised. Yeah.
I'm going to jump back to film just for 2 seconds. Many films, not all films, their character has a backstory, and we usually don't discover that until later. But I think the desire for a title sometimes makes us feel like we have a little bit of an intimate peek at the backstory of the artist. Like, what's motivating the artist to write this? What was the artist thinking about that? So I think that at least for me, that would be my first response to not having that available to me, you know, as an outsider and a stranger and a viewer who's passing by.
The desire to be explained to us, which is sort of interesting, rather than just taking in what we're seeing. You know, we want context.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
There's a strategy that biographers of poets use, and that is to bring as much biography to bear on a poem. And after reading several biographies, I won't do it anymore because I love the mystery that the poem affords me, and for it to be casually explained away kind of diminishes its power. That anchoring for me is not that I don't necessarily need biographical fact of the author, but I tend to like to know the blue period, or I want to know their relationship to their medium. Sometimes helps, but the untitled for me, it's just the Virgo in me feels lazy, you know. That is rather than a critique of the artist, but I like titles. I'm wedded to titles. Yeah.
Major, if the title is something like Portrait of Madame So and So, is that better than untitled?
Yeah, yeah, and maybe because even the language that's used kind of invites a journey towards a time where Madame So-and-so or portrait would have been, you know, and it also creates for that work the possibility of looking at other paintings that use that portraiture as its foundation. But it's more the word untitled. It's like an intentional kind of like. I like what Agnes, 8/27/21, and you named. They're all named dates, right? Yeah.
First, I just want to thank you guys.
No.
Actually, this gentleman's been waiting.
It's all right. The gentleman in the front row covered a little bit about what I was going to ask, but I was, in my mind's eye, I was half expecting to see a projection coming here of the painting and the poem together. Yeah. And there was something that's what makes the book work so well, and that they both affect each other. And to hear, just to see the projection of the painting and to hear the words was not the same. It was, I don't know, it was, I really wanted to see the book up on the screen while the poem was being read.
So that you could read it.
So that I could read it along with, yes, so that I could read it along with the narrator. Yeah.
But there's also a different attention I think you pay when you're listening to a poem than I think when you're reading it. And it's meant to be both. So I think that's what's also wonderful about hearing it here, is you get to hear it in conversation with the piece.
And bringing it to life,
Yeah.
animating it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've said it's like going from like 2D to 3D. You know?
Yeah.
No. First, I just want to thank you guys for this project. I think it's amazing. And for me, it's really personal in a way, because my father was a painter and taught at UCLA for 60 years, or UCLA Extension. But when I first went over my book before it got released with him, he started crying in the third poem, saying, "You never painted, but you're doing it here with words." So I'm listening to you guys. But these paintings are different, because it also reminds me of the Jacques Lacan statement about relationships, that 90% of a relationship is projection. And so with the abstract work, it's still what you project onto the work. which you do with any work, but it's not representational. You don't have a building, you don't have. I was also wondering, for Jill Moser, was there a generating, this is kind of rudimentary, but I keep thinking of, Diebenkorn's process. If you flip through Diebenkorn and you watch him erase the representational work until he gets to the abstract work, and then I guess later in life he goes back to representational. Were you originally starting from anything representational and erasing it and abstracting it?
No, my work before this body of work, for 30 years, my work was based in gestural line. So gestural line, marking, gestural lines, so in gesture specifically. So these forms were sort of implicated by those gestures. And that, there's a long backstory to that, but yeah, no. So that's sort of more the origin of these forms, as well as certain taxonomies of color that I was studying at the time that do associate color with forms in nature, and but there, and then of course the influence of writers on my work. So there's a lot of
That's the other thing.
yeah.
Concrete thing, the writing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Patty.
Yeah, I was a dealer, and I represented Joan Snyder, and she wanted me to title her paintings, and I had a boyfriend that left his albums, and it was 20s, 30s, 40s jazz albums. And I got it there. I got it there.
That's about a lot. Oh, there you go.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
I bet you Jill will sign some books. Oh, and please read Elena's introduction to this book. It really grounds this project. Yeah. Very beautiful.
Did anybody lose these glasses?
Are they yours still? They were laying here on the floor. Did you drop them?
Yeah.
Spent high school in the basement.
Yeah, I know.
Just
Right.
keeping it on.
Yes, I know.
For
I know.
you, it's the
Yes.
other way around.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I felt
was wonderful.
I was
I
ask
Daniel Tiffany.
Daniel Tiffany, such a pleasure.
Just amazing.
I can tell. I can tell.
Anyway, it was wonderful. I mean, I was thinking of, I'll ask Jill this, but about the idea of taking the risk of inviting writers to write about work like this that's abstract and so strong. It's almost like there's always the risk that you're, and maybe part of the motive of inviting a betrayal.
Yeah.
Instead of it always being wonderful and it's going to expand everything, maybe the excitement is that it's tricky. There's always a risk, right?
There's a funny thing, and like how you limit, let the painting limit you. I mean, you could write a whole like character narrative just off of that painting, and who's to say that's that's where that painting kind of led you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
100,000 copies on Amazon.
It's
I love the title of this poem. Oh, thank you. It's so sweet, and it's a beautiful word. Thank you. It makes me think of Turner-esque. What's her? Sorry, what's the poet's name?
You read it.
Anyway, beautiful word. Listen,
It was long.
Yeah, I mean,
and I like it.
that was fun.
That's a lot of fun. Thank you.